So, what's up people and welcome to the chapter 113 discussion of Kaiju 8号 or Kaiju number 8. So chapter 113 came out a few days ago, and as always I will leave a link to this chapter that's currently being shown on the publisher's official website, Manga Plus, for free to the North American audience. So if you're interested, we'll go take a look at this chapter before they pull this chapter back. Okay, so chapter 113. If you recall in chapter 112, we were getting to what looked like the end of the battle, because if you recall in chapter 112, the spirit of Commander Shinomiya somehow came out and was able to negate that shield that was protecting the final core in Monster Number 9's body. And the chapter ended with Kafka giving a devastating attack to Monster Number 9. And what we find out in chapter 113, or the beginning of that, is that the core was destroyed. And headquarters confirms this, and Kafka wonders, is this finally the end? But right at that point, all of a sudden we get this interesting comment from Monster Number 9, who suggests to Kafka that they should have a little chat. And all of a sudden Kafka is in this environment that looks like feudal Japan back in the samurai era, and it's in a battlefield where you see a lot of defeated warriors. And Kafka doesn't know what's happened, where he is, nor where Monster Number 9 is, but he does recognize one of the masks that's laying on the ground, and this does bring up a memory. And the mask reminds even the readers of that, if you recall in the training part of this story, when Kafka was training with Hoshina, there was that image of that samurai that came out in the shrine. The mask that is laying on the ground reminds you of the mask that samurai was wearing. And although Kafka is wondering about this, he doesn't really have time, because all of a sudden Monster Number 9 appears, but in a much smaller form than it has been up till now. And it starts talking in a little bit of mystery once again, as it always does. And it starts mentioning something about Kafka, that Monster Number 9 originally thought Kafka was a fluke, right? An anomaly in a situation where all of a sudden there was a monster that was created that wanted to save humanity. But then it starts saying that no, this was actually destined, and this was fate that was bringing them to this situation. And Kafka, of course, not understanding, is wondering what he's talking about. And Monster Number 9, as it always does, doesn't answer in an answer, but answers in somewhat of a questionable phrase. Does this place bring back any memories? Which of course Kafka is like, why should it? And 9 answers, oh, I guess you're still not well connected to it. What is it, of course, right? And then it continues to become even more mysterious by saying, your hatred must have been immense. Now, of course, Kafka is completely confused and comments that if he wants to continue the battle, Kafka is going to continue to fight. But Monster Number 9 then says, no, you've actually won. The victory is yours. And then starts talking in its really unusual way about how it was very enjoyable to learn more about humanity. It wanted to learn more about humanity and how humans worked. And that's why it continued to kind of do the things that it did, right? But now it's saying that it's utterly defeated and there's no reason to continue on. And Kafka answers, interestingly, you're lying, aren't you? And Monster Number 9 then answers, no, I'm not. I don't have any more tricks up its sleeve. And then Kafka says, well, if that's the case, what is this immense power that's coming out of you? Now this is very interesting, because from our perspective, it's most likely that monster that absorbed Monster Number 9, right? It was that great monster that Monster Number 9 was just a victim of. But if you go back to that chapter where that reveal came out, it was through Mina's perspective, not Kafka. So Mina knew about this great evil monster, but not Kafka. So this may be Kafka's first experience with regards to that. And what's interesting is when Kafka notices this spirit, there is this great rage that comes from that little tiny monster that's inside Kafka. And now we're starting to understand Monster Number 9's comment. When he said there must have been a tremendous amount of hate, it wasn't talking to Kafka, it was talking to that little monster inside Kafka. At least that's what it sounds like. And so now there's this kind of raging spirit inside Kafka. that's really focusing hatred to this monster that's in front of both of them. And monster number 9 continues on, or at least we always thought that this was monster number 9. Now I always have to correct myself that no, this is the monster that absorbed monster number 9. So though it looks like monster number 9, we start realizing, yes, this was the great monster spirit that was constantly talking. And you could see that here when it starts saying that it's coming to an end. And now that number 9's core has been destroyed, it says, rather than now that my core has been destroyed, you realize that this isn't monster number 9 that's talking. And so it's saying that now that 9's core has been destroyed, it can't contain the energy anymore that the core was containing, and so all of this energy is coming out. And at that point, all of a sudden, the surroundings, the feudal battleground that Kafka was in, starts falling apart. And now we know that this is just Kafka's spirit inside of 9. So while 9 is deteriorating, maybe Kafka's surroundings is also deteriorating. But what's interesting is while that's happening, all of a sudden Kafka starts remembering. And it talks about this big monster in front of it as being the Meiriki era Mega Monster. And the Meiriki era is around, if I recall, the 1600s in Japan. And the way Kafka is talking, it sounds like his memories are now recalling that this monster appeared at that time as well. Now, there wasn't any major wars in the Meiriki era, if I remember right. It was already at that time when the Tokugawa shogunate had already kind of taken control of Japan and closed it off for that time. So I don't think there was any major enemies of the shogun that could arise strong enough to kind of battle them. But it may be a smaller kind of feudal battle that was going on. It's hard to say. But in any case, coming back to the story, we see that Kafka's surrounding is falling apart. But from Mina's perspective, what we find out is that the evil monster has done one final attack and has at least injured monster number 8, if not critically injured monster number 8. And so we really are getting to a point where there is a question how this story will move on. Yes, somehow monster number 8 is going to defeat this evil monster, or at least the monster number 9 part of it. But it feels like now, I don't think the evil monster is really going to get away. And if the evil monster was the one that was controlling all the other monsters that were attacking Japan, then maybe by its defeat, all the invasions will cease. In which case, that really does indicate that we are getting to the closure of this story, because really at that point, there is no reason for the JDF to exist anymore. There is no reason for monster number 8 to exist to fight at least. And Kafka and Mina can finally get back together again. And so it really does imply a closure. But of course, this is a shonen manga, and there's always this way that shonen mangas often try to continue on, right? So there is this possibility that this evil monster wasn't the big bad. There is another bigger entity, maybe a society behind this monster, which was a part of it. And Kafka was able to finally defeat one of the members of that big society, right? That's how shonen stories often work. So if there is something like that, Matsumoto Naoya can continue to move on with this. But with regards to this particular story and the reasoning for why the little monster chose Kafka, well, it's starting to become much more clear. If there was some tremendous amount of hate, then it was probably a revenge sort of situation. And what's now starting to make me wonder is, I originally wondered why did it say, I found you, and then it went into Kafka's body in the first chapter. And I always thought that maybe it was because Kafka had that right honorable personality to be able to give it the power that it had, right? The little monster. But now I'm starting to wonder, because Kafka was able to see that spirit during the training, is there a blood connection between that spirit and Kafka? And I know a lot of readers at that time mentioned that possibility, but now it's starting to understand why there may be a reason for that link to exist, which is that maybe that samurai was the original host of that little monster when it was battling the evil monster back in the 1600s, and somehow it got defeated. Or that it defeated that evil monster And then the evil monster went into hibernation and came back a la Sauron in Lord of the Rings, right? And so if that's the case, it needs to battle the monsters once again. And the only way it could battle is maybe to be able to find a blood relative of that original samurai, which may be Kafka. And maybe that's why it said, I found you. I don't know. This is all speculation, and we'll probably find out more as the story continues. But it does feel like that part of the story is at least coming to closure. And if that was the main crux of this entire series, then it does imply that we may be getting to an end. But once again, shonen stories have often a sudden secondary reveal that comes out when the first mystery is finally closed. So it will be interesting to see what happens, but we will have to wait until chapter 114 to see how this goes on. And once that chapter comes out, I'll bring out another video. I hope you join me at that time. But this is the chapter 113 discussion for Kaiju number 8 or Kaiju Hachiko. If you read it, what you think about it, any comments will be greatly appreciated. And until the next chapter, happy manga reading, and as always, Jaya, nice day everyone.